A $6 million Bugatti, written off, blacklisted by the manufacturer that built it. And one guy from Leicester, England, with cameras, a garage, and more than 3 million subscribers, who decided the word impossible was just Bugatti's opening position in a negotiation. This story has rattled boardrooms, gone viral across 4 continents, and sparked a debate that goes so far beyond cars, it's almost frightening. Because here's the thing, nobody is saying out loud. What Matt Armstrong did to that Bugatti didn't just embarrass a hypercar brand, it exposed the entire model that luxury companies use to control what you know, what you pay, and what you're allowed to do with things you legally own. And the Elon Musk connection? That's where this story gets genuinely dangerous for the old guard. Stay with me until the 9-minute mark, because what I'm going to show you there about how this connects to a much bigger economic shift might be the most important thing you've heard about the car industry all year. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me, where are you watching from? City, country, time zone? Let me know. I genuinely want to see how far this story has traveled, because this one deserves a global audience. Let's go back to October of 2025. A Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport, one of exactly 60 ever produced for the entire planet, crashes in Miami. The car belongs to content creator Alex Gonzalez, known online as FXAlexGYT. Insurance assessors fly an expert in from Paris. The verdict is swift and brutal. Write it off. The repair estimate that comes back from Bugatti, $1.7 million. Not for a new car, for repairs, on a car that originally cost $6 million. So the car gets a salvage title and lands on Copart, the online auction platform where wrecked vehicles go to find their next chapter. That's where Matt Armstrong enters the story. Now, who is Matt Armstrong? He's a British YouTuber from Leicester who built his channel, currently exceeding 3.2 million subscribers, by doing what the automotive industry says you shouldn't do. Buying crashed exotics and rebuilding them publicly, on camera with no filter. Lamborghini Huracans, McLaren 720S models, Porsches. He's done it all. But the Bugatti was a completely different universe. Here's what he was looking at when he acquired the car. The front end had absorbed a massive impact. The airbags had deployed. The carbon fiber was cracked and shattered in multiple places. The iconic Bugatti horseshoe grille, gone. The hood, wings, and headlights, destroyed. And buried deep in the car's structure, the transmission had suffered damage that most mechanics would never even attempt to address. A Bugatti Chiron is not a Lamborghini. It is a machine of almost obscene engineering complexity. The 16-cylinder, quad-turbocharged engine produces over 1,500 horsepower. The car weighs over 4,000 pounds, but hits 60 miles per hour in under 2.5 seconds. Every component is bespoke, hand-assembled, and calibrated to tolerances that make conventional repair almost theoretical. Most people thought this was content farming. Clickbait. A stunt that would end with Matt walking away from an impossible project after a few dramatic videos. They were wrong. But here's what they're not telling you. The car almost never made it past week 1, and the reason why reveals something deeply uncomfortable about how luxury brands operate. This is where the story stops being about a car and starts being about power. Bugatti did something that shocked even experienced industry observers. They locked the vehicle identification number, the VIN. Think about what that means in practice. Every Bugatti dealership in the world, or every single one, was now prevented from selling any parts to support this rebuild. Not because the car was stolen, not because of any legal dispute over ownership, simply because Bugatti had decided, unilaterally, that this car should not be repaired outside of their factory. Alex Gonzalez had legally purchased the car. He owned it. Matt Armstrong had been brought in to help restore it. And yet, the manufacturer of that car had effectively declared it unrepairable by anyone other than themselves, at a price they alone controlled. That's a level of corporate authority over privately owned property that would make most people deeply uncomfortable if it happened in any other industry. Imagine buying a house and having the construction company tell you, nobody except us is allowed to fix your roof at a price only we decide. Now, Bugatti CEO Mayday Rimac didn't stay quiet. He took to social media, specifically Instagram, and addressed the situation directly. He said that most of what people were hearing online about Bugatti repair costs was simply not true and was being inflated. He pointed out that the Chiron Pur Sport's damage wasn't merely cosmetic. The gearbox housing had shattered and the monocoque had taken structural damage. He raised genuine safety concerns about independent repairs on a machine this complex. Rimac said Bugatti had made what he described as a fair offer to carry out the repairs in Molsheim, France, and he said the door remained open. But here's the crucial part. He also said something that revealed everything about the brand's actual concern. He speculated that the decision to refuse Bugatti's repair offer was driven, and I'm paraphrasing here, by the value of the content itself, by the clicks. That sentence landed like a grenade on the internet, because what Rimac was really saying even if he didn't intend it this way, is this: the real threat isn't a broken car. The real threat is transparency. If you've ever felt like a big company was more concerned about what you were saying about them than about actually helping you. So what did Matt Armstrong do when the most powerful hypercar company in the world said no? He kept going. And what followed was one of the most extraordinary public engineering sagas the internet has ever watched unfold in real time. One of the first major crises was the transmission. Mat Armstrong had stated publicly that splitting a Bugatti Chiron to access the gearbox was something only 2 facilities in the world could do. The implication was clear. This was a job for Bugatti, not a YouTube crew in a garage. Armstrong's team ignored that framing and started removing bolts. It turned out the Chiron's design is modular. With the right approach, the front and rear sections of the car could be separated. The transmission wasn't this impossible locked vault Bugatti's public statements had suggested. It was accessible. That moment became a turning point, not just mechanically, but symbolically. The next problem was the radiators, destroyed in the crash, impossible to source through official channels because of the vine lock. So a fabricator named Bob, who became something of a folk hero in the comments sections of these videos, hand-built replacement radiators from scratch. Then he spent 60 hours fabricating a custom front crash bar. Without being able to 3D scan the original component, Bob studied the geometry, understood the engineering intent, and replicated the design down to the mounting points and bolt threads. 60 hours. By hand. For a part Bugatti said couldn't exist outside their factory. The airbags? Sourced from an Audi A3? Yes. A car you can buy for $30,000 donated a component to a $6 million hypercar. Because that's what happens when you get creative rather than compliant. A coolant pipe was fixed with a section of rigid brake hose. The gearbox mount, a component specifically engineered to fracture in a crash, redirecting impact forces away from the monocoque, was TIG welded back together by a specialist. Most people thought that was physically impossible on a component designed to fail. It worked. And somewhere during all of this, a detail emerged that the internet absolutely could not let go. Mat Armstrong admitted, in comments, that he had been watching the rebuild videos. The CEO of Bugatti, one of the most influential figures in hypercar engineering, was sitting there watching a YouTube channel to see what happened next, just like everyone else. Stay with me, because what I'm about to get to in the next section explains why that detail matters so much more than it seems, and why it connects directly to a power shift that is reshaping entire industries. What time is it where you are right now? Drop it in the comments. I want to know who's up late for this one. Now here is where the story gets genuinely fascinating. The Elon Musk connection to this story isn't a single tweet or a press release. It's something more structural than that. It's a philosophical collision between 2 completely different models of how powerful brands relate to the public. Consider what Tesla did differently from the moment it launched. Tesla publishes software updates over the air. Owners receive new features, performance upgrades, and bug fixes the same way you update an app on your phone. The engineering is publicly discussed, dissected, and debated on forums, YouTube channels, and developer communities. Owners modify vehicles. People document everything from battery degradation curves to charging speed comparisons. Third-party repair is actively enabled rather than blocked. The information flows outward constantly. Elon Musk understood something about the internet that traditional luxury brands still struggle to grasp. Attention, in the modern economy, compounds faster than secrecy. A luxury brand that controls information creates mystique. But mystique has diminishing returns in an era when any 14-year-old with a smartphone can find out how something works if they're curious enough. What builds real, durable power in the internet age is relevance. And relevance requires engagement, and engagement requires transparency. Matt Armstrong's Bugatti rebuild generated the kind of engagement that no marketing campaign could manufacture. Questions, debates, emotional investment. Millions of people who had never cared about a Bugatti Chiron in their lives were suddenly watching a live stream of someone trying to TIG weld a gearbox mount back together at midnight. That is priceless. And Bugatti's response, locking the vine, cutting off parts, framing the whole thing as a safety concern, handed Matt Armstrong something even more powerful than a functioning Bugatti. It handed him a villain. The internet doesn't just love an underdog. It loves an underdog with a clearly identified obstacle to overcome. And when you are a $6 billion luxury brand and you become that obstacle, you've already lost the narrative, regardless of whether you were factually correct about the engineering risks. Comment below. Do you think Bugatti was right to lock the VIN on safety grounds? Or do you think it was about brand protection? I'm genuinely curious, and I'll respond to some of you. Now let's talk about Ferrari, because Ferrari may actually have more to lose from this cultural shift than Bugatti does. Bugatti sells around 70 to 80 cars per year globally. Ferrari sells somewhere north of 13,000. Ferrari's business model scales in a way Bugatti's simply doesn't. And that scale means Ferrari has more surface area exposed to public perception, and more customers who are watching what creator culture is doing to brand authority. Ferrari's approach to ownership has always been radically controlling. Prospective buyers frequently must demonstrate prior Ferrari ownership. They sign agreements not to resell within specified time periods. They are prohibited from making unauthorized modifications, and the definition of unauthorized is broader than most people realize. Engine modifications, bodywork changes, paint alterations, all require approval. Violating those terms can result in what Ferrari describes diplomatically as no longer being eligible for exclusive models and special editions. The internet calls it the blacklist. Justin Bieber reportedly ended up on it after reselling a Ferrari too quickly. Kim Kardashian reportedly landed on it after perceived misuse of a gifted vehicle. Whether every detail of every blacklist story is completely accurate or not is almost beside the point. The perception exists. And in brand management, perception is primary. Ferrari CEO Benedetto Vigna confirmed in early 2025 that the company is actively tightening its customization program. The tailor-made offering that accounts for roughly 20% of Ferrari's annual revenue. Even colors are being predefined and restricted because Ferrari is worried that eccentric custom builds are diluting the brand's visual identity. Think about that. Ferrari is restricting what customers can do with cars they have paid hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to own because they are worried about how it looks. And simultaneously, Matt Armstrong is on YouTube showing people airbags sourced from an Audi A3 bolted into a $6 million machine, and the internet is responding with admiration. That gap between Ferrari's tightening grip and the audience's appetite for radical transparency is not getting smaller. But here's what they're not telling you about what this does to the next generation of luxury buyers, and it's the part of this story that actually matters for the long term. Here's a question I want you to sit with for a moment. When you want to know if something is worth buying, a car, a phone, a restaurant, an investment, where do you go first? A company's website, their advertising? Or do you go straight to someone who bought it, used it, and told you the truth about it? I already know your answer, because almost everyone's answer is the same now. The trust economy has flipped. Edelman's Trust Barometer, one of the most cited annual studies on public trust, has documented for several consecutive years that people trust institutions, corporations, and mainstream media less than they trust people who look and sound like themselves. Peers, creators, independent voices, even people they've never met, whose face they only know from a thumbnail. Matt Armstrong has over 3 million subscribers, not because he's the best mechanic in the world. There are probably better mechanics in any major city. He has that audience because he shows everything. The failures, the wrong assumptions, the moments when the car does something unexpected and the whole plan has to change. The 3 a.m. problem-solving sessions. The parts that don't fit. The improvisation that somehow works. That's not content, that's trust. Built episode by episode, over years. And the generation that grew up watching that kind of content, the generation that is now entering their peak earning years and beginning to acquire wealth, has a fundamentally different relationship with brands than previous generations did. They are not impressed by mystique. They are suspicious of it. They don't find exclusivity aspirational. They find it vaguely threatening. And they find transparency, even the messy, imperfect airbags from an Audi kind of transparency, genuinely appealing. Subscribe to the Market Continuum right now if you want to keep following this kind of analysis, because the next video goes even deeper into how creator economies are disrupting billion-dollar industries in ways that most analysts are still too traditional to see. Zoom out even further. The automotive industry is navigating more simultaneous disruptions than at any other point in its 130-year history. The electric vehicle transition is creating winners and losers faster than any previous technology shift. China's domestic EV manufacturers, the BYD, NIO, XPeng, are now competing on a global scale that was unthinkable 5 years ago. Software-defined vehicles are changing what a car even is, blurring the line between consumer electronics and transportation. Traditional dealership models are under pressure from direct-to-consumer sales, and the right-to-repair movement, originally a software and electronics issue, is now, thanks in large part to stories like this one, making its way into automotive culture in a visible, emotionally resonant way. The Bugatti Veyron lock didn't just make headlines in car forums. It made headlines in general technology and business media because it touched something universal, the question of what you actually own when you purchase an expensive, complex product. That question isn't going away. If anything, as products become more software dependent, as the line between a car and a computer further dissolves, this tension between manufacturer control and owner autonomy is going to intensify dramatically. And the brands that are on the wrong side of that tension, the ones that answer the question by saying, you own the object but we control the ecosystem, are going to find themselves fighting a cultural current that is only getting stronger. But here's the most fascinating part of all of this. The car actually ran. Stay with me just a little longer, because the ending of the real-world story here is not what anyone expected, and it changes the conclusion of this entire analysis. By early May of 2026, Matt Armstrong had done what Bugatti's public statements had implied was not possible outside of the Molsheim factory. The Chiron Pur Sport, written off, blacklisted, stripped apart in a garage in England, moved under its own power. The first test drive happened. Armstrong's own description of the sensation: "It's so fast, I can feel the blood coming out my feet." That's a 16-cylinder, 1,500 horsepower machine that everyone, Bugatti included, had suggested would never run again outside of their supervision. Running. Because a fabricator spent 60 hours building a crash bar by hand, because someone figured out that Audi A3 airbags are compatible, because a team of people refused to accept that the only path forward was the six-figure manufacturer-controlled one. Now, is the car fully roadworthy? Not yet. There are still warning lights, outstanding faults, and work to complete. Nobody is claiming perfection. But the machine runs, it moves, it breathes, and that image, a supposedly impossible car driving again, became a kind of cultural Rorschach test. If you're a legacy luxury brand, you see a liability, a reputational risk, an argument for why manufacturer control over complex products is necessary. If you're a creator, an engineer, or anyone who grew up watching YouTube channels of people solving problems in real time, you see proof that the gatekeepers have been overstating their necessity. Both interpretations are real. Both are partially correct. But here's the question that keeps me coming back to this story. Who gets to decide which interpretation wins? In 2025, Bugatti had the answer to that question firmly in hand. By May of 2026, they're not so sure anymore. This was never really about one car. It was about who controls the story around valuable things. For 100 years, manufacturers controlled it. They controlled access, information, repair, and narrative. And that control was the product, not just the car. The internet didn't destroy that model overnight, but it handed tools to people like Matt Armstrong that allow them for the first time to challenge it openly, and win audiences doing so. Bugatti may adapt, Ferrari may adapt. The smart ones will. The ones who find a way to be transparent without abandoning what makes them extraordinary are the ones who will thrive in the next chapter of luxury branding. But the ones who double down on secrecy as a strategy? In an era when a YouTuber can rebuild a $6 million car with Audi airbags and hand-fabricated parts and 60 hours of welding, live, on camera, in front of 3 million people, those brands are going to find that the wall they built to protect themselves is becoming the thing their audience builds its story around. And the internet has been very clear about which side of that wall it prefers to stand on. If this video made you think about something differently, about ownership, about brand power, about what transparency actually costs and what it earns, then the Market Continuum is exactly the channel you need to be subscribed to. We don't cover the headlines, we cover what the headlines mean. Hit subscribe, and share this with someone who thinks luxury brands are untouchable, because this story suggests the ground is moving under their feet faster than most people realize. The next video is already in production, and the industry it covers is even more protected, even more secretive, and even more overdue for exactly this kind of scrutiny. You don't want to miss it.